see our way back into Perth this morning and see whether we can get on that submarine tour, right?
Now the Oberons, they're 89.9 metres long and a bit over 8 metres at beam, and they displace just under 2,200 tonnes on the surface and a bit over 2,400 tonnes submerged. And they're diesel electric boats, and unlike wartime boats, the diesels are purely for charging the batteries. They don't provide any motive power as well. Two propellers are driven by electric motors the whole time. They gave her a surface speed of about 15 knots and a submerged speed of about 17 knots. Okay, well, where we're standing is the casing. And this is the working deck when the boat's on the surface. As you can see, it's quite narrow, it's not a great deal of room. And there's only a single guardrail. It's portable, it simply unclips from the deck, so when the boat goes to sea it will dismantle. Now they could carry up to 24 torpedoes in here, including the 6 in the tubes. And the other torpedoes will be in these racks on either side of us. And there's some torpedoes in lower racks here, so you can see how they were carried. The deck we're standing on is portable, would normally be down a lower level, but they could bring it up to this level for servicing the torpedoes in the upper racks. Now when she was first commissioned, she was equipped with a Mark 8 torpedo. And the Mark 8s, they were designed and built in the UK in the early 1930s. They were built in the States under license. They were in service for many years. They were used in the Falklands War in 1982 quite successfully. Each bunk's got a reading light, air blower for ventilation, and of course curtains. Now when I say this is where they lived, I mean that literally. There's no such things as dining rooms or lounges on these boats. If they weren't working, this is where they ate their meals, or tried to. Perched somewhere, spent the leisure time, and of course slept. Now the routines varied between the boats. 3 and 6 was a fairly common one, so 1/3 of the crew were always on watch during a normal situation. But of course, as you heard, that could be varied at any time. Now we're inside the pressure hull here, of course, which is circular. So the deck we're standing on is about halfway. So there's another compartment beneath us, another deck if you like. Now all the power on the boat, all the electricity has got to be stored somewhere. So there are 2 battery compartments. One of those is beneath us, and the other one is underneath the control room. Each of those compartments contain 224 lead acid cells. That's a total of 448. And that's sufficient to run the boat for about 3 days without recharging. Or perhaps give you a better idea of the capacity, sufficient to run 3 suburban homes for 12 months. So quite a big capacity. That's the kitchen in there. Not very big, is it? Would you two like to stand in there, make a bit more room? You can stand there without having to duck.
That's a pretty small
Yeah,
kitchen.
that's right.
It is, isn't it?
There's your bunk down there, is it?
Well, when I was a junior sailor, I slept in the forward mess, the after mess, and the senior sailors mess on this boat.
You got it round a bit.
Yeah, I did. I'll end in the passageway just out there.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Then they put the rest of the rubbish in on top, close the bag up. Then the bags, they could fit 3 of them into this gas ejector here, and then they'd be ejected out. They didn't want any rubbish floating to the surface, because that would give away their position. And if they're operating in hostile waters, that's not a good thing. This is obviously the control room. Now there'll be 13 people on duty in here, so you can see it'd be fairly crowded. Up in the far corner is where the sonar operators sat with the monitors. On the middle there, in front of those 2 screens, that's where the torpedo operators sat. They fire the torpedoes from the 2 panels above, and the bottom left-hand corner, you can see there's a little lever. That's how they steered the guided the torpedoes. Right?
Well, you know, the sonar system gets the information, processes it through the computer, and then it puts it through onto the screen.
Yeah.
And then the little knobs down the bottom, the 4 knobs down the bottom, you would twiddle them. One was for speed, one was for range, one was for course, and you'd have a stack of dots that you'd have to put onto a line, and that would give you a solution.
Yeah.
And then once you got the solution, you would then set the solution on the computer, and then it would send by a tone down to the torpedo the range, course and speed of the contact.
Right.
And then when you fired it, that was already in the computer, and you would let it go, and the only reason you would update it is if you got a better solution in the meantime.
Oh, right, yeah.
Otherwise the torpedo would actually find it and prosecute it himself.
That's the radar mast. That's the DF mast. The snort mast with a big bore valve on top. The tall one's the communications mast. The little one, the end's the exhaust and the diesels. Now, normally when they use the mast, they just poke them just far enough above the surface to be effective. They keep the speed down to about 4 or 5 knots because, for 2 reasons. They don't want to create a wash like this, and B, the drag of the mast through the water affects the trim and tends to lift the bow up. So they keep the speed down for those reasons.
This room would get super hot, would it? Like with all these controls and all that? No. Okay.
It's air conditioned.
Engine room got steam.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Only after the
After you have to shut down, there's no airflow through the engine room.
Now over here,
Stand up like this.
these big brass handles, just behind you. These big brass handles, these are the main ballast valves. Now, to dive, they'd open these valves, which would open the vents at the top of the ballast tanks. Water would rush in through the bottom inlets and the boat would submerge. To surface, they close these valves, and then with these they blow compressed air into the tanks to force the water out through the bottom so the boat would surface. Okay, these 2 diesels, they are 16-cylinder 4-stroke supercharged diesels, and they're what's known as Admiralty pattern. They're not a commercial design, they're designed and built especially for this class of submarine. Each one drives a dynamo or generator which is at the end of the engine underneath the deck. Unfortunately, we can't go down to see them. Likewise, the 2 main electric motors which are fitted directly to the 2 propeller shafts, they're further down underneath the deck. There's also a workshop down there where they have a small lathe and other equipment so they can carry out some of their own repairs. Now, the normal routine was to come up to periscope depth every 24 hours to top up the batteries to keep them fully charged, and that would take roughly an hour and a half. They come up to periscope depth, put up the snort mast, and then they'll be able to start these 2 diesels. They cannot start these diesels without the snort mast being up. Now, these diesel engines, excuse me, they suck in large quantities of air when they're running. So the air duct from the snort mast is taken right forward to the forward torpedo room where we came on board. So with these diesels running, sucking air in, they're drawing air through the length of the boat, so they're getting a change of air in the boat, and also removing hydrogen gas, which is given off from the cells during the recharging process. The crew literally packed their bags over at Brook Garden Island. She was towed over here.
Is that right?
This
Oh,
week.
okay.
That's why you still got the condiments in the galley there.
Is that right? Yeah.
Okay. Now this is the electrical control room. Now there'll be 2 electricians on duty here all the time. And from here they control and monitor all the electrical equipment in the boat. And they also control the 2 main motors driving the boat. They would get their engine movements from the control room or 2 telegraphs, port and starboard. They acknowledge the telegraph and then adjust the motor as required. As you head the stern switch for the port motor, and this wheel backwards or forwards, you either increase or reduce the revs on the motor. And exactly the same on the other side. Got your rev indicators just above and your volt and amp meters above them.
Gosh, this looks a bit bare. Used to be $3 there and $3 there.
Plenty of space.
Yeah.
2 torpedo tubes there, but once they got the wire guided torpedoes, which they could literally turn around 180 degrees if necessary, they became superfluous. So they've been blanked off, but the main equipment's still there. The open manhole was the tank where they would drain the water down into after firing a torpedo. Now all those levers and the motor you see around it, they're for the steering and the after hydroplanes. They're hydraulically operated, and in an emergency they can be pumped by hand. So at the side next to them there's a gyro compass repeater and depth and trim indicators. So in an emergency they could control the submarine from down here. Now these boats were designed to, had a design depth of, operating depth of 200 metres, with a maximum design depth of 300 metres. Now when you think the submarines in the Second World War days, for instance, 100 to 150 metres was the usual limits, and some boats couldn't even go deeper than about 70 metres. So it's quite an increase in size, in depth. Now to achieve those depths, the pressure hull was about 25 mils thick. It's about an inch thick. And you can see the thickness of the pressure hull here, where it's been cut through for the hatchway. See how thick it is all the way around. In addition to which, it's supported inside by T-frames. They run all the way around inside, a bit like a rib. So there's a T-frame inside this cork insulation. Now, deep water is quite cold, so it's there to help reduce, the cork insulation is there to reduce condensation. Now where they cut through for a hatchway, they have to support the ends of the T-frame with this very heavy hatch coaming running around. In addition to which, they put strong backs across between those pads to support the sides of the hatchway against the enormous pressures at those depths. They're very important. They're always in position unless the boat's in port on the surface and they wish to use the hatchway. They're never removed otherwise. And those are the strong backs you see on the deck there. You can see how solid and heavy they are. And they just hook over the top of the pad and they rest between the opposing pads. Now, one of the things they used to do in the days when they had copper pennies, are you guilty of doing one of this? They used to slip a copper penny up between
20 cent, 20, used to slip a 20 cent piece.
Yeah. They used to slip a copper penny up between the pad and the strong back, and after a dive, the pressure would have flattened that penny to a thin copper wafer. And they give that to somebody as a souvenir, just completed their first dive. Now, when decimal currency came in, there was a shortage of copper pennies. So they put 10 cent, 5 cent pieces up there. And you can the nickel coins are much harder than copper, and they're actually harder than the steel pad, and they've left an imprint in the pad. And you can see quite clearly, it's a 10, you can see the 10 cent, that's the 5 cent next to it. When you go up the ladder, you can have a closer look at it. I can't think of a more graphic illustration of pressure than those depths.
The other thing we also used to do is we used to get down to 600 feet and they'd tie a string across the control room.
Yeah.
And then we come back up again and the string would break.
Yeah, well, you've got those two brackets there by hand.
You can clearly see the 10.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Back to the real world.
Yes.
At 400 meters into roundabout.
Well, what do you think of the submarine? Wasn't bad, was it? We just on the outskirts of Mandurah. That's the Peel Inlet. Goes into a dirty great big lake in there. And yes, it wasn't bad. There was a chappie who's taking the tour used to serve on the ovens, which was the H.M.A.S. ovens, which was the name of the submarine. There's a chappie there on the tour who actually served on it, so he knew a bit more than what the tour guide knew, eh?